Good morning, my fifth graders. It's your art teacher here again to read to you Slavery and the Underground Railroad from NTI packet number 5. This is your social studies packet for today. Let me go ahead and turn this. Oh, there's Mufasa. He's liking this work from home thing. All right, back to it. Slavery and the Underground Railroad. The Underground Railroad is an important part of our nation's history. Since the American Revolution, states have divided into states that allowed or states that prohibit slavery. Slavery was implicitly permitted in the original Constitution through provisions such as Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3, commonly known as the Three-Fifths Compromise, which detailed how each slave state's enslaved population would be factored into its total population count for the purposes of apportioning seats in the United States House of Representatives and direct taxes among the states. The Underground Railroad was a secret system developed to aid fugitive slaves on their escape to freedom. Involvement in the Underground Railroad was not only dangerous, but it was also illegal. So, to help protect themselves and their mission, secret codes were created. The term Underground Railroad referred to the entire system, which consisted of many routes called lines. The free individuals who helped runaway slaves travel toward freedom were called conductors, and the fugitive slaves were referred to as cargo. The safe houses used for hiding places among the lines of the Underground Railroad were called stations. A lit lantern hung outside would identify these stations. A dangerous path to freedom. Traveling along the Underground Railroad was a long and perilous journey for fugitive slaves to reach their freedom. Runaway slaves had to travel great distances, many times on foot, in short amount of time. They did this with little or no food and no protection from the slave catchers chasing them. Slave owners were not only pursuers of fugitive slaves. In order to entice others to assist in the capture other slaves, the owners would post reward posters offering payment for the capture of their property. If they were caught, any number of terrible things could happen to them. Many captured fugitive slaves were flogged, branded, jailed, sold back into slavery, or even killed. Not only did fugitive slaves have the fear of starvation and capture, but there were also threats presented by their surroundings. While traveling for long periods of time in the wilderness, they could have to fend off animals wanting to kill and eat them, cross the treacherous terrain, and survive severe temperatures. For the slaves traveling north on the Underground Railroad, they were still in danger once they entered the northern states. The Fugitive Law of 1850 allowed and encouraged the capture of fugitive slaves due to the fact that they were seen as stolen property rather than abused human beings. The Fugitive Law of 1850 also outlawed abating of fugitive slaves. Their safety and freedom would not be reached until they entered Canada. Not all slaves traveled north. There were also underground railroads that led en route for Mexico and the Caribbean. Unfortunately, not all runaway slaves made it to freedom, but many of those who did manage to escape went on to tell their stories of flight from slavery and how to help other slaves not yet free. Harriet Tubman, Henry Bibb, Anthony Burns, Addison White, Josiah Henson, and John Parker all escaped slavery via the Underground Railroad. Conductors and abolitionists. Underground Railroad conductors were free individuals who helped fugitive slaves traveling along the Underground Railroad. Conductors helped runaway slaves by providing them with safe passage from the stations. They did this under the cover of darkness with the slave catchers on their hot heels. Many times these stations would be located within their own homes and businesses. The act of harboring fugitive slaves put these conductors in grave danger, yet they persisted because they believed in a cause greater than themselves, which was freeing thousands of enslaved human beings. These conductors were a diverse group of people. They included different races, occupations, and income levels. There were former slaves who had escaped during the Underground Railroad and voluntarily returned to the lands of slavery as conductors to help free those still enslaved. Slaves were understood to be property. and therefore the freeing of slaves was viewed as stealing slave owners' personal property. If a conductor was caught help freeing slaves, they would be fined, imprisoned, branded, or even hanged. Conductors of the Underground Railroad undoubtedly opposed slavery, and they were not alone. Abolitionists took action against slavery as well. The abolition movement began when individuals such as William Lloyd Garrison and Arthur and Lewis Tappan formed the American Anti-Slavery Society. The organization created the Declaration of Anti-Slavery, in which they gave reasons for the construction of society and its goals. The society distributed an annual almanac that included poems, drawings, essays, and other abolitionist material. Freedom Stairway, the 100 steps leading down from the Rankin House toward the Ohio River. The John Rankin House in Ripley was a station on the Underground Railroad. It is unlikely that the stairs in this photograph predate the early 1900s, but until documentation is found supporting the existence of the stairs in the pre-Civil War years, they can still serve as a reminder of the perilous journey that the fugitive slave and the welcome to be found at the top of the hill. John Rankin, 1793 to 1886, was a Presbyterian minister and educator who devoted much of his life to the anti-slavery movement. He is credited with helping 2,000 slaves escape to freedom. It has been said that a light was placed in the window of the house to indicate it was safe for slaves to approach. The character of Eliza in Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin was reportedly inspired by a story of a woman who crossed the partially frozen Ohio River with a baby in her arms, making it safely to Rankin's house. The John Rankin House is now a museum, part of the Ohio History Connection's statewide network of historic sites. The current steps were put in place in the 1900s. All right, now we have your choice board. Choose one activity from below to turn into Mrs. Clark. First, write a poem about the Freedom Stairway as though you were either a slave who has just made it to the stairs or an abolitionist as though you're awaiting for slaves to reach the stairs. Choice 2, research where at least 4 sites were a part of the Underground Railroad and be sure to that the state the name of the abolitionist that helped in the location, locate them on a map as accurately as possible, and then there's a resource listed. Last choice, imagine that you are a conductor on the Underground Railroad and you create your own quilt squares. Hello, we already did that in art class, so you should obviously choose that one because you already did it. All right, freedom quilts. Many slaves quilted blankets left from old flour sacks, feed sacks, worn clothes, reused curtains, and old coats. Slaves quilted blankets and coverlets for their masters. Slaves often hung their masters' quilts in order that they may air out. Quilts were used for the Underground Railroad. Many quilts had stitches that were used as maps for the road heading north, maps of the plantation. They included the manner of how to act and where to escape en route north. Quilts included well wishes and a way to ward off evil spirits in their journey north. Below are some common pattern squares used to help direct the slaves. Oh, and I remember some of these when we did this, guys. All right, the North Star. Follow the North Star of Freedom into Canada. We have the monkey wrench. Get together everything you need mentally and physically to escape. Flying geese. Follow the geese migrating north in the spring. Log cabin. It either signifies a safe house or it encourages you to find some shelter. Bear's paw. Follow a hidden mountain path to a bear trail with food and water alongside of it. Drunkard's path. Be careful to take a roundabout path because the hunters and hounds are in the area. Breeches. You must dress like a free person in this area. Wagon wheel. Pack a wagon with goods you'll need. Shoe fly. There was a person here who can help you on your path to your escape path. Rose wreath. Someone died here on the path to freedom. Sailboat. There are boats or a large body of water nearby. Crossroads. You are approaching Cleveland, Ohio, a major crossroad leading to freedom. And then we have a lovely map of the United States. All right. Thanks for watching, guys.